Welcome, I'm Glen Anderson, producer and host of this TV series, Glen's Parallax Perspectives. This series explores a wide variety of issues related to peace, social and economic justice, the environment, and nonviolent social change. We especially provide opportunities for the public to hear voices and viewpoints that are rarely heard in mainstream media. Mainstream media, politicians, and culture see the world in conventional ways. The establishment is stuck in how they see the world. In order to solve problems, we need to see things differently. This TV series, Glen's Parallax Perspectives, can help us see things differently so we can solve problems at all levels, from the local to the global. This series is called Glen's Parallax Perspectives. Here's what the word parallax means. Put one finger in front of your nose and another finger farther away. Close one eye, then open that eye and close the other. Your fingers will seem to move. This is called a parallax view. This TV series invites you to look at issues from fresh perspectives. Also, see much information about the issues that we cover in this TV series and previous episodes of this series at my blog, www.parallaxperspectives.org. And now I invite you to watch this month's program. This month's interview on Glen's Parallax Perspectives will bring us up to date on what has been happening to immigrants and what people at the state and local levels are doing to solve the problems. If you are a little fuzzy on understanding the realities, this program is for you. Most of you will know some of what our guests here will say, both about the problems and about the solutions, but even well-informed people will learn a lot more. Also, everybody will be inspired and encouraged by the positive work that's being done statewide and here in our local community. Here's my personal disclosure. Over the years, I've produced several TV interview programs about immigration, and I've always said that all four of my grandparents came here as immigrants between 1900 and 1910. They had no money, they could not speak English. But my grandparents worked hard, they invested their lives in the American dream, and they produced my parents and me. My brothers, my sister, and my cousins all did well from our poor immigrant grandparents. I want people who come from other countries to have the same opportunity too that I did. But recently things have changed, and immigrants coming from places other than Europe are often denied opportunities that allowed my family to succeed. I want every person to succeed, and this program that you are starting to watch will help people move ahead. We have two guests to help us explore the topic. Alejandra Hunt works for an immigration attorney in Olympia. She volunteers with two local grassroots groups that serve immigrants in a number of ways. Later in this interview, we'll talk about Olympia's Strengthening Sanctuary movement and another nonprofit organization called CLO, which serves Latinos. Alejandra also is a trained mediator with the Dispute Resolution Center of Thurston County. Welcome, Alejandra. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. The Reverend Paul Benz is an ordained Lutheran pastor who is co-director of the statewide Faith Action Network. That's an interfaith, multi-issue nonprofit organization that works for social justice in many ways, including through the Washington State Legislature. Before the Faith Action Network was created, Paul was the director of the Lutheran Public Policy Office of Washington, and for many years, Paul has worked on many issues to help religious people throughout the state work together for social justice. Paul, it's good to have you here.
Thank you, Glenn. Yep.
So the issues that we'll talk about during this hour affect really a great number of people. Alejandra provided these three facts. Washington State includes nearly 1 million immigrants, about 1/7 of our state's population. More than 45% of the immigrants in Washington are already naturalized U.S. citizens. And over 170,000 U.S. citizens in Washington live with at least one family member who is undocumented. Now we want to dig more into these realities and what's been happening lately. Since Trump took power in January 2017, people have paid attention to his deliberate cruelties to immigrants, both documented and undocumented. But immigrants have been abused long before Trump came along. Presidents and Congresses of both political parties have been making things worse, even before Trump. For example, Obama had deported more people than any previous president. Alejandra, could you summarize the situation a bit before Trump, and then we'll get into that.
Sure. Yes. With President Obama, as you said, there had been a lot more of deportations. The target people that were the people that were targeted for deportation were people that had committed crimes, people that were on a list of high-risk immigrants. The difference is that with President Obama, the people who had been here for a long time, or they had a family, or that haven't committed any crimes, were pretty much left alone. And so if they were stopped by an immigration agent, or the agents have something that is called, or they would be able to say, well, I can see that you are not a dangerous person. We're just going to let you go. We're not going to detain you. And people, that was the policy before. They had discretionary power. That's what I'm looking for. And so with President Obama took power.
When Trump took power.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When Trump took power, then that all changed. That everybody became a priority for deportation. And that made it so that every person that would be stopped or arrested, then it didn't would have to be detained and probably deported.
Okay, there are some other policies that changed. The news have talked about the DACA program, the program for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and the news also has referred to some young immigrants as dreamers, and that's DREAM is the acronym for some federal legislation that people kept trying to get Congress to pass, and Congress failed to pass.
Correct.
That was the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act. Those initials spell DREAM, and so the young people who would have been benefiting from that are called dreamers. Can you tell us about the Obama administration's program for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA program?
Right, correct. DACA is well known. Yes, there are about 700,000 DACA recipients right now in the country, and it was created as a standby, basically, until legislation was passed by the Congress, and it was a way to protect young people or people that were brought as children or as young people, to protect them from deportation and to give them a work permit, and so that until legislation passed, they would be able to basically be protected and not be deported, or because they pretty much were brought here with fault of their, it's no other fault that they were brought to the U.S. So it was a protection.
Yeah.
It was not meant to be permanent. But the legislation was never passed, so it became then an issue. And right now we are waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision whether the program will stay and more people can keep applying when if they get all the requirements that are needed, or if they will end the program, or if it will stay as it is right now, which is that what is happening is that people can only renew applications every 2 years, but no new people are applying for the benefit. It's just renewing right now.
Yeah. When I've done previous interviews on immigration, our guests were saying, boy, we want to get Congress to pass the DREAM Act, the Development Relief and Education for Alien Minors Act, and we were expecting that if we just push hard enough, we'll get that to change, and they never did that.
Correct.
And now things are rolling back the other way. There are some other things that have changed also under Trump. What are some other changes for people arriving since Trump took power, for new arrivals, refugees, for people who are seeking asylum? And people have a right under federal law and international law to apply for asylum if they're at serious danger from where they came from. How have things changed under Trump?
Correct. Yeah, that has been one of the most devastating issues that those policies have affect people in ways that are terrible. People are already fleeing, typically countries where there is conflict, poverty, and people have the right to seek asylum. And right now, the policy is that people are not able to go through a normal process to seek asylum, which is they go to the border, they speak to a immigration person or a border patrol, whoever is, and they tell them why they're seeking asylum. And so if the immigration, then they go through a process where they then get an interview to see if they have credible fear, and then typically family members will be able to take care of that family, or they can come into the U.S. and go through a process, interviews and courts, and until it's determined whether they qualify for asylum or not. But they are in the U.S. and they have somebody that is going to take care of them and help them. And right now, people are not able to do that. People are stopped actually in Mexico and not even able to get to the border to seek asylum, and that is devastating for communities and families. And
it's really an outrage, just a severe human rights violation, and more than a dozen states, including the state of Washington, have sued Trump for stopping the DACA program.
Correct.
And Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson called Trump's decision, quote, cruel and unlawful, unquote, and he added, quote, it's outrageous and I'm not going to put up with it, unquote. So it's good to have our Attorney General from Washington State stand up for human rights.
And I think he has sued the Trump administration, I believe, at least 25 times.
Yeah.
And he's 25-0.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. The things that the Trump regime are doing is just massively illegal, and they keep losing in court.
And inhumane.
And yeah. I want to check with you a little bit more, Alejandra, about some things. Trump has caused additional problems even for immigrants who have documentation and they're living here legally. They just haven't gotten citizenship yet, but they're living here legally, and it certainly is worse for the people without documentation. There's this new Trump rule called the public charge rule. Tell us about that.
Yes. Right now, that rule is in an injunction with the federal government, so it hasn't taken effect.
Yeah, and this is as of December 12 of 2019 when we're taping the program. All these things are rapidly changing in the courts.
Yes. And so, but basically what it does is people who are residents that have a green card, they wouldn't qualify for citizenship if they have applied for any kind of services, social services, like it would have been Medicaid, or any public benefit that would disqualify people to become a citizen. So it's a great fear. You know, this is something that is affecting many people, and it's which right now it is not happening, but still things like WIC or food stamps, those were not going to be included, but it's.
But the tendency would be to keep people trapped in poverty and trapped
Right.
in outsider status, even though they're here legally.
Right, exactly.
And that's
Yes.
just wrong. You also, when we were preparing for the program and we were talking on the phone about things we might say, you mentioned that some kids who are in school are just constantly in fear. What's going on with
Yes.
that?
Yes, it's part of being living in an atmosphere where immigrants are demonized, where immigrants are bullied, and kids are afraid that when they get home, their parents are not going to be there anymore. Kids are afraid that what would happen if my dad goes to work one day and doesn't ever come back, or my mom, or
Right.
so right now we have a crisis with children in school, but we do have schools, I think, that are aware of the situation and beginning to do something.
Yeah, because if a kid is born here, they're automatically a U.S. citizen.
Correct.
Because you're born here.
Correct.
But your parents might not be. And they're at risk. So,
Right.
yeah, it tears families apart.
Right, and as we say, there's thousands of mixed status families, which it could be a parent or it could be a son or a brother that doesn't have the legal status, but it affects the whole family. It affects everybody. People are living with fear, and it's very difficult. Right now, it's very difficult times for immigrants.
Yeah, I want to turn the conversation a bit toward what folks are doing to help solve these problems.
Great.
I'm glad so many people around our nation have been protesting against Trump's cruelty, and they're practicing real solidarity with immigrants. They've convinced a lot of religious bodies and colleges and universities and local governments and state governments to practice understanding and compassion, and that's just really what this country should be about.
Right.
People have accomplished some makeshift solutions, and a lot more solutions still need to be worked on, and that'll require more volunteer efforts, more people power to meet these serious needs. For thousands of years, religious congregations, Jewish, Christian, and other faiths, have recognized a religious obligation to provide safety. Sanctuary is the technical term, for people who are in danger from persecution or in danger from police or governments. And some congregations have let people stay in their buildings to protect them from legal dangers. And Paul, I wonder, could you share some biblical or other insights, some contexts for understanding the motivation for religious bodies to provide sanctuary?
Sure. Sanctuary has been around, just in terms of all religions of the world believe in providing some kind of sanctuary for those who may be at risk in their life. Particularly the Judeo-Christian faith, we estimate Jesus at roughly now over 2,000 years ago. I'm just trying to put a time frame on this. And you go back to the Jewish scriptures, to the books of Moses, particularly the book of Leviticus, where you get that phrase, treat the stranger in your midst like one of you. And in that same chapter, you have love your neighbor as yourself. That same, a very similar concept, right? Then in the New Testament, you have the great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And a second likened unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. So, and of course, we are taping this close to the Hanukkah Christmas holiday season. And of course, Jesus and his family, his mom and dad, left over the fear of the political emperor, Herod, to flee, to go for sanctuary to Egypt.
Yeah.
So not only are religions oftentimes always a sanctuary for people whose lives are at risk, but countries sometimes can be sanctuaries as well.
Yeah.
And we have turned far from that, because I'm not going to compare the current person with Herod, but I will say that the president of this country is very good at creating fear amongst the vulnerable.
Right. Yeah, he really is a bully who actually enjoys being cruel to people who are vulnerable. It makes him feel like a big shot if he can trample on somebody less powerful.
The refugee admission, every year, this country, the president is in charge of setting the refugee, the number of refugees who come from various countries of the world. We are now at the lowest number ever in the history of this country. Mm-hmm. The current president likes to talk about how he is setting history. He's setting history in an inhumane way right now, just in terms of refugee admissions.
Yeah. A good number of cities, including Olympia, Washington, have declared themselves to be sanctuary cities. Olympia City Council had unanimously proclaimed Olympia to be a sanctuary city on December 13, 2016, just 5 weeks after Trump's election. And nationwide, immigrants, volunteers that support human rights, local religious congregations, and the general public have convinced a number of local governments to take positive and humane actions to protect the safety and the rights of immigrants. And some colleges and universities and some local religious congregations have also declared themselves sanctuary. Alejandra, could you tell us a little bit more about Olympia as a sanctuary city and the growing sanctuary movement?
Yes, we were very fortunate that our officials are immediately saw the need for something, for a sanctuary city for our community, immigrant community here. And so the group, part of the group that I'm part of is Strengthening Sanctuary Alliance, is called now. Was formed right after the city was declared a sanctuary city, and part of the reason why that group was formed is so that we actually would be able to have action to that declaration.
So implementing the good intention
Exactly.
in
So
practical
that
ways.
Right, so that there's not only a sanctuary name, but there is actually something happening that would be able to protect and help immigrants in our area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll in a moment we'll talk about some of these examples. There are two local success stories that I know you mentioned, and I have other friends who've mentioned also. One is local people helped to arrange for an immigrant woman to be released from ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, so she could be reunited with her son in Texas. So that's a success story. There was local people mobilized and put on enough pressure that the government relented and let her be free. And Olympia's Temple Beth Hatfield, the local Jewish congregation, is providing sanctuary services for a Guatemalan mother and her son.
Correct.
And they've got volunteers from a lot of other congregations, not just the Jewish one, but people from a variety of other faith communities are volunteering to help out, taking shifts and doing things. So it's a real community effort.
Yes.
So that's encouraging to see. Both of you and a lot of other people have succeeded in convincing Washington State Legislature to pass a good law and convincing Governor Jay Inslee to sign it into law in 2019. And Paul, can you tell us about the Keep Washington Working legislation that passed in 2019?
Yes, spent a lot of sweat and labor on that bill for many sessions.
And it was worth it. This is great.
Yes,
a great victory.
Yes, and Faith Action Network was involved in that with a lot of wonderful partners. ACLU, Northwest Immigrant Rights Group, and on down the line. A lot of the grassroots groups like CLO were very, very involved and supportive of it. It started out several sessions ago as the Trust Act. And the reason it was called the Trust Act at that time is that we wanted to create more trust between the community and law enforcement, particularly in the undocumented community. There was a lot of, because of what the bill would do statutorily, and what it does do now is on civil matters, on civil cases, it calls for a separation of communication between federal ICE agents and CBP, the Customs and Border Patrol, with local law enforcement at our jails.
So this is because there had been information flowing back and forth that caused local people to be vulnerable to the feds when they were dealing with just a local legal matter, and now all of a sudden then they were at risk.
It's one of the reasons why the Northwest Detention Center is overflowing with people in it that really shouldn't be there.
And so the Keep Washington Working legislation, which is now a law, protects local people from that federal exposure to risk.
In terms of civil cases.
For civil cases, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, now the new Keep Washington Working law accomplished some good things, but a lot more needs to get done. I know you and others are working on something for the 2020 legislation, 2020 legislative session, that would help people when they visit courthouses for whatever reasons. Tell us about that intention.
Yes. The bill is called Courthouses Open to All. So as most all of us know, the undocumented community comes and participates in all levels of a community like everybody else. And they go to courthouses to do their business like everybody else.
Yeah, so you might be like applying for a marriage license or transferring your car license or
paying taxes, paying bills.
any of that kind of stuff. Just routine civil matters.
Exactly. And ICE knows that. And ICE is basically your federal law enforcement agency. You know, in terms of the undocumented community. They are agreeing with the Trump administration. We want to get as many of these people out of our communities and our country as possible. So that's where there is a lot of detention happening at our courthouses. So this is what we call 2.0 of the Keep Washington Working.
So my understanding of the bill that you just described here, the Courts Open to All bill, is that it would restrict ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, activity at courthouses in 3 ways that I know about. Prohibit prosecutors, judges, and court staff from sharing information with ICE or with CBP, the Customs and Border Protection. Secondly, to require courts to collect data about when and why ICE or CBP agents will be at the courthouse. And third, to require judicial warrants for civil ICE or CBP arrests on courthouse grounds. So those are some very practical.
We're going to hire you as a lobbyist.
Well, I saw this on something that
bill.
one of you had provided some information, and I thought people watching this program need to know about that. I mean, it's very practical, tangible needs to be met here.
We have one of the prime sponsors of this bill is the first legislator who is a refugee to this country, State Representative Milan Tai. And I mean, that's an example of how our nation is full of, you know, we are all immigrants, other than, you know, right, Native Americans and the slaves brought to this country. But anyway, we are very. It will probably. We hope that it won't take as many sessions as the Keep Washington Working.
Well, that's good. So, and the legislative session starts on the second Monday of January each year, and so this becomes January 13 for 2020. Is there other legislation that you're supporting for the 2020 legislative session?
There is, and we urge our viewers to let their legislators know of their support if they support this bill, to let them know about that through the legislative hotline or through the email process. The other bills that we are working on is the right now we have in our state the Apple Health Insurance that covers young people literally from 0 to 18. We know, given our economic circumstances in this country and here in Olympia, Thurston County, that many still stay at home. Many young people, when they reach to 18, are still do their college or whatever, living at home. So what we want to do is expand this program to age 26. And what we particularly are looking at in terms of this expansion of through Medicaid would be for our undocumented neighbors as well. Because we know the importance they are to this economy and to our communities. So,
the notes I have say the relevant bills are House Bill HB 1697 and Senate Bill SB 5814. And I checked, and that seems to be what I looked on the website. The website for the legislature is amazingly good. It's leg.wa.gov. It's amazingly informative, user-friendly. You can visit leg.wa.gov and search for a bill by subject or by number. You can find out how to contact your legislators depending on which district you're in. It's just
It is
very
truly
useful.
democracy at work. It's your tax dollars being well spent. in
It
terms
really
of
is.
that website.
I use it a lot because there are a lot of legislative bills I work on, and it's always the best source to go to, along with the nonprofit groups working on it. And so I do encourage people to visit leg.wa.gov. I want to check with you about something else, Paul. A number of organizations that work for immigrant rights have planned a legislative advocacy day and a big rally at the Capitol for Wednesday, February 5, 2020. The organizers hope people will attend the noon hour rally on the steps of the Capitol and also visit legislators' offices to push for the good bills. And another friend of mine suggested people can also hold signs on Capitol Way running north and south through that part of Olympia with signs relative to the issues because that's more visibility. Tell us about this opportunity on Wednesday, February 5, 2020.
Very important. We all know how many lobbyists are in the state capitol when the legislature's in session.
And most of them are working for profit-making
Yes.
companies that
Yes.
might not have our interests at heart.
Yes, and they're in their pinstripe suits and 300, 500, whatever. Anyway, the point is that we want as many grassroots people to come and be the lobbyists, be the voice for justice in the halls of power. That the Capitol is the people's house, and that the immigrants in this country and the undocumented are a very, very important part of our state.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity if you want to support the immigrant families, immigrant community. Come to the rally at noon at the steps of the Capitol and show your support. This is a great opportunity to show and do something.
Yeah, we have a very accessible legislature compared to some states where it's like a bunch of big shots that keep the people away. And here, these folks are really quite accessible, and we have a lot of rallies on the Capitol steps for all kinds of good reasons, health care for everybody, and all kinds of good issues.
And I think what's really important, Glenn, is that not only that they come down that day, because that is important for the legislature and everybody else in government and the public to see a large number that are coming down in terms of the issue of immigration. But it's important the day before, the day after, because groups come and go every day down there. Lobby groups do. And I think it's really important that they sustain this work of justice, and that the broader public support that as well.
Right, and through the legislative website, you can find out when these bills are having hearings, and people can go and watch the hearings and listen. You can also sign up and testify. I've testified to a number of legislative committee hearings about various kinds of bills, so people can do that. And you had mentioned the legislative hotline, and I remember from decades ago, it probably is the same number, 1-800-562-6000.
You got it.
They've had the same number since the 1970s.
Yep.
And it works. You can call, and it's like, I don't know, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something. And somebody's there,
During
and
the session.
they'll take your note on your phone message and pass it along.
As long as you know your address, you don't even need to know who your legislator is, because if you can give them, it helps if you, and you can leave up to 4 messages, for the governor, and everybody has 3 state legislators.
Right, you got a state senator and 2 state house members, so we need to do that. I want to check in with you, Alejandra.
Sure.
You and some other local, very savvy people, good, hardworking, knowledgeable folks, have been working for 3 years now in the greater Olympia area with a grassroots organization, the Strengthening Sanctuary Alliance, which you mentioned, formed after the 2016 election. And before I ask you about what they're actually doing, tell us just a bit about the organization itself. Who's in it? What do you,
Well,
and then we'll talk afterwards about what you do.
Yes, this is a group of folks that got together right after the Olympia became a sanctuary city, and it's people who really care about the community, immigrant community, and they are mostly, I think, a lot of retired people that are very skill in organizing, and we have groups that have really made a big difference for our community. We have a police eyes group that it actually work part of the Keep Washington Working bill. We were also able to work with them and find the causes of how the information was going up to the federal government. And so also we have an education group that goes to the schools and school districts and talks to from the superintendent to the secretaries, social workers, and letting them know what are the families are going through right now and how they can help. How can they make a difference for families? We also have a legislative group who's also working with the new bills, and we also have a new group who is accompaniment group, so that can accompany people that need to go to court but are afraid because they might be detained, which it's happened here in Thurston County.
So when I heard you and others tell about these different things, it's like you're figuring out what the needs are, and let's organize some volunteers to meet the innocent all-volunteer group.
Absolutely, yes.
And you'll figure out, okay, this is a need, let's organize, and people find out what the facts are and organize to fix the problem.
Right.
And on case after case after case, you're doing that.
Yes, and it's great. People are bringing their skills to bear, and it's really wonderful. And made a lot of great friends, and it's making a difference in our community.
And as you said, there are a number of retired people who have skills they brought with them, and then they can apply them here. It would be nice to have a bigger age range.
Yes.
But I know it's harder on a lot of these volunteer efforts. It's hard to get people who are young and middle-aged because they're busy with jobs and families and things.
That's exactly right.
But it needs people to make these things function.
Yes.
The Strengthening Sanctuary Alliance has been accomplishing a lot of good work here, and I know they have an email address that's olympia.sanctuary@gmail.com, and I'm wondering how do you pay for this work? I mean, everybody's volunteer,
right?
But even so, there's got to be some costs.
Yeah, there are some costs, and not only that, we also have a fund so that if there are families in need, we help. We have helped people that are about to be evicted, and so we have a fund for emergency fund. We call it emergency fund to help people to cover some of the costs that otherwise would be homeless now, or different things. So we send money to the woman who we are sponsoring, basically, that is in Texas now. So we do need. That's another way the community can help us, and they could. Also, we have a P.O. Box. It's a P.O. Box 1684, Olympia 98507, and you can send your donations if you feel like they want to help.
That's good. So it's volunteer time and volunteer financial support.
Financial support, yes.
That's what it takes.
Yes.
I want to check with you about another good group that you volunteer for a lot.
Absolutely.
You're on the board of CLO.
CLO, yes.
For more than 2 decades, since 1996.
Yes.
CLO has been active locally, and now you have activities in Shelton and Mason County, next county west of here, northwest. And CLO provides a great variety of services, really, again, practical things that people need. And you're active on the board and helping in a lot of ways. Tell us about CLO and what CLO does.
Yes. So as you said, it's been around for about 20 years. And we are focused on, we have 3 programs, education program, we have mental health services program, and we have advocacy for victims of violence. Those are the main programs that we have. And with the education program, we have literacy programs, of course, English lessons for adults and children. We have one-on-one tutoring for kids, and we meet people where they are. Basically, if they need math, then we do specific target programs for them. It's not just like general tutoring, but it's targeted to the needs of the of the kids. We have computer classes. We also have sewing classes. But though a lot of that is just people. It's a safe place for the community to come and have a cultural experience too. And our advocacy program is very important too. It's called Proyecto Esperanza, and we help really we help people that are victims of violence go through the process, go through the court system. We help them with referrals for attorneys. We really do a lot more than just that. We help with anything. We have it's called navigators. We call navigators, and anybody that comes with any questions and needs help, we do that. We help them.
When we were preparing for the program and talking on the phone, you mentioned they'll help in schools because people don't know. Schools can be sort of a how do they function? What's going on?
Yeah, how to navigate the system, the school system. Yeah.
And so people will do that so that the students and the parents, can interact meaningfully with schools like other folks do who are not immigrants.
Exactly. Yeah, it is difficult, to learn, and if if your English is not your first language, it's hard enough when it is navigating Skype, and so we help parents. We do parenting classes too, and we are basically where the needs are. We try to help.
Yeah, they have a really good new website.
Yes, we have a new website.
It's CLOprograms.org. So www.CIELOprograms.org. Lots of good information there. New website looks really good and very informative.
Right, and we are a nonprofit, and so we depend on volunteers and also on people. But they're donations.
Yeah. And Paul, I want to express support for the group that you work with, and I donate money. I've been donating for a long time.
Thank you, Glenn.
And before, when you were the Lutheran Public Policy Office, that was good too. And now you merge that with Washington Association of Churches, and now you've got Faith Action Network.
8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the long work that you've been doing as a person, but also the organization you work with. You're co-director of Faith Action Network, and that's FAN, and the website is fanwa, FANWA.org. And your interfaith and multi-issue for social justice, and especially doing a lot of good legislative work, as well as helping faith communities do things. Tell us just a bit more about that group.
Sure.
What you do.
Of course. So there are 3 key words, and you've already mentioned some of them. Glenn, is that we are statewide.
Yeah.
So we're not a national organization, though we do work on issues in the other Washington in Congress, and we are interfaith. So we work with what I like to call the entire family of God, and so we have great relationships with the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Sikh community, Buddhists, and so many non-Christian as well, of course, with all the denominations within Christendom. And the last word is either advocacy or justice. We are a social justice. We support, like a congregation, a faith community will, like they have done for centuries, provide food for the hungry, shelter for the homeless, right? And what we do is advocate in what we like to call the halls of power in government at the state level, local, and federal level to make sure that the programs that are run from the government for the hungry and for the homeless, just to use those 2 examples, are sufficient.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they are not sufficient, and make sure that they don't get cut but get expanded.
Yeah.
And we operate out of 2 networks. We operate out of a network of what we call advocating faith communities.
Okay.
So we have 153 all around who have formally joined FAN. And then we have the other network is the individual network, over 7,000 that are divided and organized into our 49 state legislative districts and our 10 congressional districts.
And that's a smart way to go. I appreciate knowing that, and I appreciate the work that you do, and I donate every year. And so so many people think about, let's just give some food or give some whatever, but that doesn't change the system. And you folks work at the system level to change the laws and things so that we can have justice built into the system, fairness built into the system. And that's just crucial. And a lot of people fall short of doing that. And you're actually 501c3, even though you do some lobbying, but you are 501c3, so you do a lot of good stuff besides the limitation on the lobbying.
Right. We are not a C4. C4, according to the Internal Revenue Service, is an organization that can endorse candidates.
Right.
But what a C3 can do is take positions on bills as well as initiatives. So, for example, the affirmative action initiative that was defeated, unfortunately, on the state ballot, we were strong supporters of that, right? Minimum wage, reducing gun violence.
Right. And so if somebody wants to donate to your group,
the best way that our viewers can contribute to Faith Action Network is to go online to
FANWA.org.
WA.org. And you'll see the donate button there.
That's good. That's certainly worth doing. There are some other groups that you folks have been working with. I just want to lift up the names of these good groups, and when after we've produced the program, I'll be typing up a very thorough summary of what we said during this interview and post that to my blog. And at the end of that thorough summary, I'll be listing dozens of organizations that are just really good sorts of information on these kinds of issues. But I want to just mention a few of them right now that are nonprofit organizations at the state or local level. Northwest Immigrant Rights Project is just amazingly good. The ACLU of Washington, the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, the Church Council of Greater Seattle, and there are others.
La Resistencia.
Okay, I don't know them.
Well, they do a lot of work at the Northwest Detention Center.
Oh, good. Okay.
That's one of the things that I didn't mention in the state legislature, that we are trying to reform that system.
That's right. Yeah, the Northwest Detention Center, which was built on a toxic waste dump near Tacoma, and is just more than full of immigrants. It's a privately owned
GEO.
GEO is the corporation that is ripping off taxpayers at a horrendous amount of money to provide injustice for vulnerable people. It's just a horrible.
And our state attorney general has a lawsuit with them regarding the wages, the sub-minimum wages that are being paid.
It's like just forced labor almost.
It's just a terrible thing. So all of these efforts need help, and I'll be listing names and websites for a lot of these groups on my blog. The blog is www.parallaxperspectives.org, and then from there you can find this interview and the thorough summary at either the immigration or the immigrant part of it or the TV programs part. I'll have it in both places. And there'll be a link to watch the video of this interview, as well as a link to read the thorough summary. And even though this TV station will air the program 3 times a week throughout January 2020, it's only within the county of people who have cable, but the blog is accessible for anybody, anywhere, at any time, and long into the future. So it's more exposure. And I'll mention this at the end of the program as well. I want to check back with you, Alejandra. Sure. Ever since Trump started running for president in June 2015, he's been slandering immigrants, lying about them by claiming that they're criminals, but actually immigrants cause far fewer crimes per capita than do people who are born here. Correct. And he wants us to be afraid of immigrants, but actually immigrants are good neighbors. They're competent coworkers, they're nice to be around, they're enjoyable as friends. And is there anything else you could say about Trump's behavior and our principled response?
Yes, I believe that one of the, as we said before, a bully, he attacks people that he thinks that people have no voice. So who's going to stand up for the immigrant? Who's going to tell him that is not that what he's doing is attacking somebody that can't stand that for themselves, so has no voice, and I think that it's the fact that it's happening right now. It's a terrible thing for our community, or for anybody to be looking at this and think that it's okay. And he's got this incredible machine, that is propaganda machine, that it's up to us to stand up and say that is not true, that's a lie, it's misinformation, and it's to provoke fear in people.
Yeah, and this is one of the advantages of doing what we're doing here, which is getting the word out to the public, and also working with nonprofit organizations that bring people together to add to the voice of people who otherwise are elbowed out of the way.
Exactly.
I just want to make a really quick comment on that. More and more we are seeing, besides nonprofit groups in this state and in this country, we are seeing more business, corporations in the business community stepping up in defense of the undocumented community, if I could say that, because they understand the value of the workforce.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And one of the key elements of Keep Washington Working is that now the State Department of Commerce is setting up a work group that will have business at that table. There'll be several other nonprofits at that table to start looking at how can we create even more better policies that are inclusive and will continue to support the undocumented community.
Yeah, and here we're taping this program on December 12, 2019, and either today or yesterday, something happened in Congress that was good, where folks that you would not have expected have said we got to have a path to better safety for farm workers. And the email I got was from the United Farm Workers, and they mentioned who was on the conference committee in Congress that made this happen. And one of them was a conservative Republican from Eastern Washington who knows that the farmers there are suffering because, Representative Newhouse, because the farm workers are in such danger that the farmers need a reliable workforce, and they finally figured this out after how many years?
Well, I believe that it has been, is that hypocrisy of it all, because for years, the government knows that immigrants do contribute to the economy of the country, of the state. So the status quo of not having legislature for immigration reform was, everybody was okay because people are paying taxes. Even people who have no documents, they pay taxes.
Right.
So it was like, okay, so everybody's getting what they need, money. But now that is so much attack on immigrants and policies are changing, they realize that the economy could be in danger if they don't do anything. So having this legislation about for migrant immigrants is amazing, and it's part of it's showing that the government do know that people do contribute.
Yeah, I want to share some information that you provided when we were preparing for the program.
Sure.
A sixth of the workers in Washington are immigrants, and they work in a very wide range of occupations, including a lot of skilled professions. Immigrants in Washington state have contributed billions of dollars in taxes. In 2014, immigrant-led households in the state paid $5.7 billion in federal taxes and $2.4 billion in state and local taxes. In 2014, undocumented immigrants in Washington paid an estimated $316+ million in state and local taxes. And if they could achieve legal status, they'd be able to get better pay, because right now, as undocumented, the employers can underpay them. And so if they had legal status, they'd be getting better wages and could pay more in taxes.
So there is something that the Social Security Administration gives to an undocumented person. It's called an ITIN number or ITIN number. So so that undocumented people can pay taxes. So people go, they get their ITIN number and they pay taxes in hopes that someday that is going to count for them to be able to maybe get a status or so the government gives people a number or so that they to pay taxes. They never get any money back, but they pay. And everybody in the immigration community knows that. So everybody knows that they have their ITIN number.
That's right.
Which is, you know.
And we're running a bill this coming session on that very thing for the Working Families Tax Credit Program. So to make sure that as we find funding for the Working Families Tax Credit Program, our neighbors in the undocumented community can receive those benefits as well.
Right.
So,
Well, and you know, if you're undocumented and you go to the store and buy a pair of shoes, you pay sales tax on the shoes just like anybody else does. You know, so
Doesn't
they're paying taxes like
there is
anybody
buying
else.
power from the community.
Yeah. So I want to just wrap things up here a bit. There's another good source of information, the American Immigration Council, www.americanimmigrationcouncil.org, and they have a lot of information, including economic data. There's a lot more sources of information. As I said earlier, when I post this video to my blog, parallaxperspectives.org, I'll also post a thorough summary of what we said during the interview. And at the end of that thorough summary, I'll have a list of dozens of nonprofit organizations, sources of information, and a few videos and a few other articles and things. So visit parallaxperspectives.org. Parallax has two L's, one R and two L's, parallaxperspectives.org. Click either the TV programs part or the immigrants part. Look for this program, which is titled State and Local Efforts to Protect Immigrant Rights. And you'll be able to see the video and read the thorough summary, and including the list of many, many sources of information. Also on my blog, there's a link to the May 2017 TV program I did, which is the most recent time I had done a program on this topic, and read the thorough summary. And so it's all there too. So this is my pages of all these lists of things, which I will not read on the air, but you'll see it on the blog. I want to thank our guests, Alejandra Hunt and Paul Benz. I want to thank all the people who've been watching. As I said at the beginning of the show, my grandparents all arrived here as immigrants after 1900. They had no money and they could not speak English. But at that time, the American dream still existed, and they participated, and my parents were born, and now I'm here too. And I've got a TV show. But they came from Europe, and the U.S. has a long history going way back into the 1800s of discriminating against people who came here from Asia or Latin America or other undesirable places. And that discrimination, that racism, is currently dominating the U.S. government and driving all kinds of horrible policies. But fortunately, a lot of people have better values than that, and we recognize the oneness of the entire human family, no matter where you came from. And we know that immigrants make America great. Racism does not make America great. Immigrants do. And ordinary people who are not at risk need to stand up in solidarity with people who are at risk. And people can get more information about immigration at the immigrant part of my blog, parallaxperspectives.org. There's also a lot more information on different categories about peace and social justice and nonviolence. We are all one human family. We all share one planet. We can create a better world, but we all have to work at it. And the world needs whatever you have to offer. Thanks.